Good morning. God bless. What is great, good, and real. I wanted to come on today to follow up to last night's drop 10 versions, one life, or something to that effect. Why I put it out and why I think it's significant and why I felt compelled to discuss it, because I think it's a critical topic. And the short version of it, before we get into some granularity around what I want to drive home, is that the room taught you the rules. And we walk into rooms regularly. And because it's just part of life, that's just what we do. Because life is just a litany of rooms that are connected and interconnected. I talk regularly about not just Jung's collective consciousness, but the idea that there is this sort of connection that is like a 0 point almost, that everything is proximity based, and the closer you are, the more connected you are, but everything, regardless of how far it might be, is connected. Something's happening somewhere right now that could impact your life directly and indirectly, even if it's just something you learn about and talk about that's news, right? But part of what really stimulated this was because I was reading deeply across a litany of books in the sort of psychological space, if you would, the consciousness space, the faith space. And what I'm finding as I read different literature, some is scientific driven, some is less scientific driven. All of it seems to be interconnected in some way. Some say it differently, some explain it in logical terms, some explain it in somewhat mystical terms, where it feels more belief of what you can't see for what you see versus, look, this is what you see and this is what it is. All of it ties in some capacity to the self. The self. I am myself. You are yourself. And how often we may or may not think of ourselves in context of how we are performing and behaving consciously. In that, consciousness is at the core of our image, if you would. I call it the image of God and Creator. You can call it a cognitive image. You can call it a neurological image, a biological image. Pick. It doesn't matter. It all comes back and ties back to you. How conscious we are is significant, but also there's a reality that we can't be that conscious that often. The data suggests we're only conscious about who we are 5% of our lives. The other 95% is sort of rhythmic, habitual, automated, and it has to be that way. I'm going to digress from that point because it's not for today. But what I was reading that really sort of stunned me and shook me and had me think deeply about my life and our lives. And when I think about my life, I think about our lives because of how connected we are. And I do so in a selfish way because I care about how my contributions are individually. And I think selfishly we have to think that way, because how else can I relate if I don't think about myself in the equation? Now, I've learned to subjectively and sort of objectively consider that you are an I, and I leverage really my most intimate relationships to have that correlate and practice, if you would, being selfless and trying to absorb other conscious beings, how they're performing, behaving, and how it's impacting them. I thankfully have teams and folks that I meet with collectively and individually. All this helps me sort of formulate some logic and stability around how I think I want to live my life. Because this to me is more significant than anything. I've been on it very deeply lately, the margins. Life is less grandiose than we might want to think, as far as how often we are sort of in the light, but yet in the same way we're always in the light. And when you become enlightened, you realize the light is always shining. But we don't always perform visibly, but yet the world is always watching, right? So this point of consciousness in different rooms, it started because I was reading deeply across, again, multiple texts, almost to explain it fundamentally. It's like this split persona, split personality. This is clinical. This is real people who are struggling with mental diseases and mental health complexities. It's typically driven by a melancholic state. meaning the person is having very, very strong difficulties with life. And when they have strong difficulties with life, it's as if the consciousness creates a second persona to help mitigate the stress and the struggle that comes with the standard state of consciousness. Now, of great significance is not just the multiple personalities and how that sounds. Hear me as far as the states of consciousness and how powerful altering your state of consciousness can be when it occurs, and how I will tie that into how we perform as individuals regularly and daily. The rooms that we go in all have rules. Those rules are sort of like a state of consciousness. And when you enter that room and accept those rules, your consciousness aligns with the state of consciousness for that room. And that however long you perpetuate that state, or however long you're in that state, however long you enter that room, is sort of almost like a micro personality. How I see it is this way. If you can think that contextually, from a hierarchical perspective, you have one dominant state of consciousness. Now, this is also, I talked about it in the show last night. This is not new as far as identifying that you can shift sort of states of consciousness. I talked about Bars, who talked about the global workspace theory, and that there's contextually, that's why we talked about context a lot recently, a state sort of who I think I am, and then there's these little sub-states. I think of it because of my IT background. There's like one big domain. I am the domain of, I call myself, I've been given the name Jeff, right? I am Jeff, and Jeff has a domain, and then these little subdomains are built based on who Jeff is being, depending on what the room is, what the time is, what the mood is, etc. But now back to these altered states of consciousness. Folks who are typically in a melancholic state, and we can also argue and surmise that we as people, we face difficulties, we face troubles and traumas and experiences, extreme and not so extreme. Some of it is just the regular pursuit of life. It gets frustrating, right? You can relate. Life throughout the day throws you difficulties, big and small. Let me tell you about this state that I learned that gave me goosebumps. You can take someone who has created an entirely separate state of consciousness, and what occurs is that these two states of consciousness, they have no memory of one another. You hear what I'm saying? Why is this important? All right, I'll use me. My middle name is Jared. So if you think I can be Jeffrey and I can be Jared. Jeffrey has no idea who Jared is. Jared might have some idea who Jeffrey is, because it's said that the altered state and the higher state of consciousness, or the one that builds off the first one, which was sort of broken, if you would, it has an awareness of it. And the significance of the awareness of it is to sort of disassociate. Yeah, I know that dude, but nah, I'm not that dude, because that dude is weak. I don't want to be that dude. So when I'm this dude, when I'm Jared, I have nothing to do with Jeff, because Jeff is weak, right? When I digress into Jeff, I don't remember anything that Jared did. Let me explain what happens. The states of consciousness can be altered so significantly that if consciousness one, who is Jeff, has allergies, has certain illnesses, asthma, or even is somewhat debilitated, could even have a limp or walk with a cane. When I shift into the altered state of consciousness, which is Jared, that person has no same illnesses, to the point that it has no illnesses at all, inclusive of the debilitations. I'm hyped right now, so stay with me while I try to get my words out. I'm so excited to talk about this. This means so much to me for how we live life. Anyway, I flow into that altered state. No allergies, no asthma, no limp. Do you understand the significance, or am I losing my mind? That you can alter your conscious state so much that your physical, I talked about that the physical is important. Recently, I opened up about self-love. You can't, like the flesh is so, it more than anything, it's intoxicated by temptation, right? And the greatest temptation for me that drives us into this melancholic state, I think, is to sort of the stasis, the stagnation, the inertia, the comfort. It has a debilitating effect. You just want to stay comfortable because deep down you're scared of taking risks. You don't want to open up into another room. I think about, if I can get there, these rooms have different impacts on you, and they create those states which can be overwhelming and almost incapacitate us towards growth for our lives. But think about that if I alter my conscious state so much, I can forget all my illnesses. There are people who speak with stutters who now all of a sudden have no stutter, which also means that debilitated state of consciousness, that weakness, that fear, that drive towards littleness. I'm very confident here. I'm very strong here. I'm very formidable here. And the body complies. The life complies. Consciousness complies. You're talking about people, there's studies on people who have gone away for 2-3 months. In that short duration, created separate lives, did different things, built new routines that were entirely to the sort of polar opposite of what they used to be, and mostly consciously. Return to the previous conscious state, have no idea of it. But the significance is, by altering that conscious state, they change everything about who they believe they are. And when you change everything about who you believe you are, you can change everything about how life treats you. That is the significance of this. That you could alter your state of consciousness. So now in this space, I believe if you want to title the niche, spirituality, self-improvement, personal development, motivation, inspiration, consciousness. Why are folks so disciplined around meditation? Why are folks so disciplined around journaling, around altering your state of consciousness? And they talk about habituating and getting into an automated new rhythm of subconscious state that aligns more ideally with the state of who you want to be is. Difficult because you got to come to consciousness enough to retrain your subconscious. But the point is, these things are possible in non-mentally ill people, although I would argue we all have some mental illness by description, which is why I talked about in one of my shorts, which got some great feedback. We label. We might be burning out. We might be triggered into anger. We might be all these self-doubt things. You can work through them. You can work through them. All those things are consciousness trying to remind you of what you either are or are not, who you are currently being and who you might want to become. The difference, of course, is the work to get you from one side of the bridge to the other. But there is a reality where you can alter your reality by altering your state of consciousness. Now here's the one caveat here, which is why you might label this a mental illness that is legitimate, right? These folks that have multiple personalities, there's no interoperability. There's no harmony. There's no congruency. There's no togetherness. They're split. We likely are, and the large majority of us aren't suffering in that way. We can't split. We can't really just forget who we are, what we've been through, and the trauma that persists and insists and could be awaiting us. There's something happening right now that we want to believe is for the absolute benefit of our lives. There's also something that could be happening that would change us fundamentally, that could break us. That's why we also prepare. That's why I'm also so big about altering your state of consciousness around identifying with who you want to be, picking a signal and not deviating from it. Because you don't know what's going to come up. You don't know what life is preparing for you on either side of the spectrum. So now if you consider rooms, right? The room sort of teaches you the rules. And I've been in a lot of rooms over the course of my life, the way all of us have been in a lot of rooms over the course of our lives. And some rooms are more consistent than others. The difficulty is when new rooms open, who do you bring into that room? And how often are you opening new rooms? But think today about the current rooms you enter. There's a you likely in your professional life. We all have a professional life to some capacity. Even if you're like, I don't work, I collect. I've been there. Yes, that's your professional life. You collect. You're still being provided for. That's just a reality. I used to have to wait online. I talked about this before. I watched, I think it was Epps, Mike Epps. He talked about food stamps, how today they have a card and back then we used to have the paper stamps. That was a big insecurity of mine I used to hate when my grandmother used to send me to the store with coupons. I hated it. I hated having to wait on the welfare line for cheese. Found out recently, I had a conversation with my wife and my mother-in-law, that was actual real, I thought it was processed cheese. It wasn't. There was an influx of cheese during that time, so they decided to give some out to people as part of the welfare program. Imagine that. And it was apparently very healthy, very good cheese. So you have a professional room. Who are you in that professional room? You likely have a title and a role and a job description. How do you stay within the bounds of that room and that role? And what is your conscious approach? Because of your title, because of your perceived authority or lack of authority, do you shrink or do you inflate? There's that reality. I'm in a situation right now, oh my, when we talk about reflecting sometimes, I had a professional conversation with someone over a group meeting. I didn't know what to expect. I never met the person. And he sort of overwhelmed me with his approach. And he challenged me in a lot of ways I wasn't expecting. I came into it very sort of, I don't want to say docile. I wasn't focused. I just thought it was going to be a meeting I didn't really have to speak in. I listen, I take notes. I thought I was there to protect my team because I had assigned some folks to handle it. And I try to give autonomy and let folks take the lead. When he changed the tone of the room, it caught me off guard. When it caught me off guard, he sort of overwhelmed me to the point that when I got off the call, I was like, wait, the next time I can't let that. I can't, we shrunk a little bit. And and in fairness, in assessing, I didn't want to match his energy because I didn't want to cross the bounds of professionalism. I felt like he was taking me there, that he was so inflated with his ego. And I also knew he had a very difficult situation on his hand. We're going through sort of a merger. And if you've ever been through a merger and an acquisition in business, those things are highly intense. It's a lot of pressure. A lot of money's being thrown at it. Timelines shrink. Resources are minimal. There's a buyer and a seller. Some have higher motivations than others. And all these things are important for the context of what the room is and what the room isn't. Now, you know the way the universe works. I got an email this morning. We're going to get on a call later. I'm going to prepare differently for that call because I understand what the room offers now. So I don't want to always make it seem like we shrink, we minimize ourselves, we're weak. No, in fact, and what I've been learning from some of the progress of the channel is a lot of us are a lot stronger. We're persevering, we're pushing through. But in that way, you shouldn't sacrifice who you are. Because the more you sacrifice yourself consciously, the more you build conscious routines of, well, we just sacrifice ourselves. It's not a question of shrinking, it's more a question of, do you take leadership? You can have leadership in your role, regardless of your role and your title, in a room, especially professionally. I can lead my role. I can assert myself when I need to and speak and raise my hand. I can be silent and take notes. I can be authoritative in that I'm leading because it's my time to lead. I can be authoritative while I follow. What I suggest you don't do is blank out consciously and just go with the flow of the room. The real critical component, if you take nothing away, is don't let the room dictate how you perform. You bring your signal into the room, enhance the room, even if it's to just remain calm, sort of stoic and silent. Maybe stoic is not it, because stoic kind of removes sometimes the accountability measures, if I understand it already. But who you are in that room is significant. Now, I started with the business room because if most of us spend 40 hours, 50 hours, maybe you're grinding like I was previously. If you heard the last live, I don't do more than 40 anymore. But my 40 is impactful. I learned that consciously. I put a lot more effort in my 40 than some people put in 80. That's wisdom, that's experience. I've been in the business 20 plus years, so I know how to do these things relative, right? And sometimes it still means logging in early and putting in 3-4 hours on a slide deck or a presentation. And then I have less to do during the standard hours and 9 to 5. It's more watching and observing. But it also comes with the role, right? It comes with the role. You have to know the role. That's a big thing too. Understanding your role consciously, understanding the boundaries of the role, understanding the rules of engagement for the room. Every room has rules. But you shouldn't let the signal of the room change who you believe you are fundamentally. What's my signal? I am someone who is confident. I am someone who is articulate. I am someone who understands process and how to invoke process. You might be more innovative. You might be less organized, but I still bring an energy to the room that can help elevate ideas and empower other people. Sometimes it might require you to take over the room entirely, either vocally or through silence. But understanding the room is critical. Now, while you're spending those 40 hours a week there, while you're in that room, what is it offering you and how are you approaching it consciously? Think about that. Who are you in that room and what does that room make you feel like? There are some rooms that just perpetuate a robotic kind of, some of us are just operational driven. Some of our careers and our jobs are just you're processing. Ticket after ticket after ticket after ticket. Email after email after email after email. You kind of flow into that. And what that does too is it stunts the potential for growth. That's a lot of it too. When we get too comfortable in our room, we stop seeking novelty or we stop being approached by novelty. The context never changes. So now every time I enter that room, I just flatten into a state of consciousness where I'm not seeking growth. Now do that for 40 hours over the course of the week. That leaves a massive imprint of consciousness of who you are. You have 40 hours where you're spending not trying to grow. Think about that. Then you sleep 8 hours a day. So now 2/3 of your day, how targeted is your sleep? How do you approach your sleep? That's a real thing. I didn't think it was. I learned this for myself. I talked before, there was a time where I couldn't fall asleep without praying. When I was taught religion, I said my Our Father, my Hail Mary, my Now I Lay Me. Now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. And I couldn't sleep unless I said those prayers. Then I sort of stopped believing. Then I reintroduced myself to God. Now I believe prayer is conversational. I talked about I pray on my address. I pray to be grateful for my day. I pray for my family. I pray on my family's name, on their image. I'm thankful that we made it through the day. And I do this every night. My point being, I talk myself into an unconscious state because I believe it all is, and I talked about this recently with consciousness, it's all a stream. Your life doesn't break when you fall asleep, right? It's still connected. You might not remember dreams. You might not care about your dreams. I could argue for a different episode. You should. We can talk about lucid dreaming. We can talk about the dream itself is when your ego drops. That might be who you are at the most. That's when you're unconscious and everything that is inside of you from a psyche perspective, the ego really has no control. So you just sort of really get into this state of who you really are. That's why they tell you to journal your dreams. In any event, I'm conscious about how I go to sleep into my unconscious, my subconscious. It's taught me some things. Now, 2/3 of that day, I'm very deliberate now at work. I'm very deliberate in my room. I've always been that way because I've always sought out growth to the point where it's caused me friction. Because when you're growing from the lower ends of the spectrum and trying to break into management and upper management, that's an arduous task for anybody. That's why careers are careers. And folks at my age are in this demographic of people on the vice president level, et cetera. Anyway, my point being, those rooms are locked, right? I'm conscious about my consciousness. I bring certain principles, right? Discipline, integrity. I'm formidable. I'm articulate. I study. I know my craft. I understand how to use my energy. I understand how to use my words. I understand how to think when I'm in these situations. I understand how to pause. I do this. I don't let the room shrink me, break me, or subdue me and flatten me out. That's the significance, right? You're not going to flatten me. You're not going to get me to not think. Even the guy that pressed me the other day, I was able to still pause and sort of understand, don't lose control here. There's certain uncontrollables and you can't really, it's not going to alter anything that's going to occur right now. You're going to get into an ego battle. But what are you in your workroom? And then because work sort of occurs, throughout the chunk of the most effective time of the day, 9 to 5, right? Who are you in the morning? Who are you when you come home? Do you come home? Are there some nights you're like, I don't really want to come home, right? Who are you on poker night? Who are you when you're just with the boys at the bar or the girls at the bar, right? Girls' night, men's night. Are you different people, right? Who are you when you're on your phone? Do you, if you're in an intimate relationship, do you get nervous when your phone's left open on the table and you walk away? I've been there, right? I'm at the point now where I no longer go on private for web browsing, and my phone, everybody in my house has the passcode, and I share locations with everybody in my house. I didn't do that before. Did I have something to hide? I don't want to get into that. You could argue who I was being on my phone was very private to me. I didn't want to let that be shown out in the light, right? So now you're taking these different states of consciousness, and one of the greatest significance things is they conflict with each other. They conflict. So in that way, you almost have this multiple personality going on. I'm this way here. I'm this way here. I'm this way here. I'm this way here. I accept this here. I don't accept that there. That's conflicting. So now your mind, your nervous system, your consciousness is like, yo, who are you really? Well, okay, you're here. I know what to invoke and activate. This is how we behave here. I know what to invoke and activate. So in that way, because you can't forget any of the things, you're blended, but at the same time, while you're performing in these rooms, you forgot about who you are at home. You forgot about who you are as a husband. You forgot about who you are as a father. You forgot about who you are as a friend. I'm locked in on professional. And there's some validity there. You should do that. But your signal shouldn't deviate. I bring the same version of me everywhere. God, faith, honor, loyalty, commitment, integrity, fortitude, discipline, worth repeating. They're not punchlines. They're signals to live by. So that when I enter the room consciously, there is no deviation from my conscious states. I am the same all the time, win or lose. If for no other reason than to not break down my psyche. And then when we talk about attracting new things for your life, new growth, one of the things that we come to realize is this. The biggest and greatest rooms are the unexpected ones. There's a room right now waiting for you don't know about. How do you approach and enter that room? Do you enter it with full confidence? You enter it with trepidation? You enter it with fear and doubt? You enter it with some gratitude and some possibility around novelty and changing context and growth? Do you not even think about it? Do you not even think about it? Because also, new rooms come very infrequently. But yet life and consciousness says, every time I give you something new, this is how you treat it. So you really just, once again, flatten. And you're like, man, I missed an opportunity for growth. Man, I missed an opportunity to take advantage. How many more times? Think about that. How often have you said to yourself when you come back and have brief introspection and reflection, oh, I could have. But consciously, you're like, what happened? Your signal. That's your signal when you enter a new room. Now, I also believe that is what trains you on how to handle novelty. Every time something new comes up, every time an opportunity comes up, do you research it to death? You're never going to have enough information to know how much information you need to take a risk or not. You either take the risk or you don't. And if you think about it and think about it and think about it, you stay in a state of thinking about it. And then we go back to what I talked about recently as far as consciousness and how you behave and perform regularly and how you change rooms. God is blessing you through will and free will at every time. But you keep conflicting the signal. So you get as much energy as you can when you're here, when you shift, when you come home, when you sleep, when you go out, when you go back, and it's just this swinging, and nothing has time to compound except you compound inconsistency. So we talk about you got to compound consistency for growth, and that growth just happens over the space of time. Lack of growth happens over the space of time too. You become consistently inconsistent. So consciously, the universe, God, whatever you believe in, the energy, the connectedness, it builds you an inconsistent reality. And that usually floats you into inertia. Consider this. Consider all the possibilities and where you are in your rooms, what the room means to you. Do you have to redefine the room? And that can bring us into our do-you cycle, right? What room can you disrupt today? I personally think your most intimate room, your most intimate relationship, have a disruptive conversation about, yo, I need to find a way to grow. I might need you to support me because I don't know what I'm going to do quite yet, but I got to start disrupting some things in our lives so that we can take the next step. And then you own it, right? What can you own today? What can you own today? You can own how you walk into every room you're going to walk into right now. Remind yourself and own every room requires the me I believe I am at all times. Then you want to yield. Yield the reality, too, that you can't control the rules of every room. But just because you can't control the rules doesn't mean you have to align with them. If the room doesn't offer you what you need, yield the reality that you think you have to stay there. Release the room. Then you want to observe, right? Watch how your reality start to shift and change and adapt. Watch how you start to carry over and observe how your conscious state becomes consistent. You become less split and more harmonious, even between where you are split, because self-doubt still exists, but that's how you build confidence, right? Then you want to unleash action, 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 action. If at any juncture you feel the need to pause and hesitate, move. Just move. Move in the room, move around the room, move through the room, but don't stand still. I think of great significance. I think of great importance. I hope this made it to you exactly how it should make it to you, and that your life is blessed, right? Change your mind, change your life. I am who I say I am. Do you and stay rich.